Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Financial Resources Committee. Could I ask everyone to make the fire safety instruction? Hearing the alarm, you should leave the chamber by the double doors at the back, exit the building through the main entrance, and congregate in the car park. Also, please switch off your mobile phones and turn any other electronic devices being used to silence. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting is subject to an internet webcast recording where the proceedings are capable of repeated viewing. If you are speaking in the public area of the council chamber, it's likely that your image will be captured by recording cameras and result in your image coming by the broadcast. This is mandatory to human rights. If you wish to avoid this, you should leave the public seating area of the council chamber and move to the upper gallery. If members are for any reason not present for the whole debate on an item, you should consider and seek advice if necessary on whether it would be appropriate for you to vote on that item. I remind members to declare any interest when this item is raised on the agenda. Okay, right. Item 1, policy strategy. Right. Have we received any policy strategy?
Thank you, Chair. Members have been received from Councillor Rutland and Councillor Bartlett substitute this evening.
Councillor Bartlett, you're back. Good to see you. Welcome. Welcome to the meeting. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations to be made? No? Okay. Right. Item 3 is minutes of the previous meeting. The minutes begin on page 5, Appendix A, which lists the actions from the previous meeting, begins on page 9 of the agenda. Further updates for actions 2, 3 and 4 were circulated to committee members yesterday morning. Are there any questions still from those minutes? Councillor, did you get your answer? No. I know Mr. Grace was trying to put something together for you, so if you're waiting, it is 25 to you, so apologies for letting them know, of course. Yeah, but that was the one that I hadn't seen an answer for, so it's coming, alright? Okay. Councillor. So, can you turn on your microphone? Sorry.
Sorry about that. Yes, it's 0.6, and for what is duration below, it's actually the duration of the investments. So what's your fixed interest I held, and what's the weighted average of them, please?
David, did you finish on 3, David, or not?
I gave a response to some of the HRA loans, which is what I thought it was about. But if it's about the general fund investments, then that should be that I'll be in the Treasury report, so I can either send that to you or provide it later. Next up.
Send that, David, to Councillor Gordon. Okay? Yeah, okay, that's great. Councillor Bob.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a slight tweaking of the wording, please, on the paragraph about street signs on page 7. I actually did say that I asked the question whether it would not be easier, that I asked if it would be cheaper to actually have the facility in-house to repaint street signs rather than having to necessitate their replacement. So that didn't actually document what I said properly, and I don't believe I've actually had the reply to that question. I'm happy to be corrected by an officer if they believe that I have.
Can we go back on that one to Mark Tubman and get an answer? We'll get you an answer on that. Yes, Bob. Okay. No problem. Okay, is that agreed that I sign these minutes as a true record for the meeting held on 28th of January, which begins on page 5 of the agenda? Agreed. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Right, item 4 is the Chair's report, and this begins on page 11 of the agenda. There is only one item on there. I do have another item I wish I mentioned. But that's for the vulnerable customers. This was an issue that came up when we were at the present presentation on customer services. Is there any questions at all right around that? No? It was okay. The only, sorry, Councillor Bolt.
Can I just ask on one item that's actually not there that I was kind of expecting to be there? Previously, you and I have discussed, and I've reported, the multi-storey car park in Brentwood on the first level is covered in graffiti. It has been for about 6 to 9 months, I believe. It is really even in a worse state now than when I first reported it. Is there going to be some progress on getting that resolved? Because it really isn't a safe, doesn't feel a safe space to go into to use, particularly late at night.
Yeah, Mr. Anderson, could you give an update, please?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Barber. Yes, prior to the latest episode of antisocial behaviour and the graffiti, we had actually completed removal of graffiti in the car park. We've employed a contractor and they attended towards the end of January, I believe it was, and regrettably, literally within 24 hours, 48 hours of that being cleared, the site was just again, I believe it was on a Saturday evening, with graffiti. We have already arranged for that contractor to come back to site, and we're actually making those arrangements. In terms of security of the site, we're also progressing that. The site already has extensive CCTV throughout, which not only goes to the parking office, but also goes to the central control room at the town hall. We are reviewing the CCTV to see where we can make improvements to that, and we are also in conversation with the contractor, which is placed in order to have some additional work done to the automatic doors, so the car park will actually be secure, and you'll only be able to enter or exit if your vehicle is in there or if you have a pass for a season ticket.
Councillor Barrett. Okay, great. Just the other update is to let members know, I went to Brentwood County High School recently. When we come on to the Economic Growth Action Plan, one of the areas is Schools Outreach Programme. And we've already done a Schools Outreach Careers Options Programme at Sheffield School and also at St Martin's, and this recent one at Brentwood County High. And very, very good programme, and it's great to see the students really engaged with it, and it's definitely something that I'm keen that we carry on doing. I believe we've got some more schools lined up. I think Laurie will give us an update on that, but just wanted to let members know on that. Okay, I'm going to move on now to item, item number 5. Are we waiting for? Okay. We've got a situation where Rob Ransome from Glaston is manager doing a presentation tonight. You've probably seen that in the agenda, which is waiting for him. He's coming in person, and he's coming in person. So we'll put that one back for the time being. Okay. And we will move on to item 6, which is the Economic Growth Action Plan. This begins on page 29 of the agenda. Ms. Evans, do you have anything you wish to add?
Thank you, Councillor Kendall. We have before you a summary of projects for 25-26 that gives you an overview of what we have been delivering this year. Because many of our projects are still in play, we would like to bring back a further update to members this summer that gives the final KPIs for this financial year. The Beyond High Street Grant Fund is now open, with applications coming in across the borough. There is still funding available, so we strongly encourage you to promote this grant scheme to your businesses in your ward. All councillors have been given flyers to distribute. If you need more, please let us know. The main body of the report gives you an outline of the action plan for the economic growth team for 26-27. Since the report was written, we have a few updates to share with members. The current vacancy rates for the borough's high streets have actually gone down slightly since the last update provided to members in December 2024. Brentwood's vacancy rate is currently just under 11%. Shinfield is hovering at 3%, and Ingatestone is just under 10%. The East of England average is 12 to 14%. Yesterday, we received news that we have secured £2,500 of Essex County Council funding to support extended delivery of our new School Careers Options Programme. This new skills-based programme has been piloted at Sheffield High School, Brentwood County High School, St Martin's, and Beckett Keys during the 25-26 academic year. Last week, we received news that Indurant will be sponsoring Essex County Council's stand at the UK Youth Property Conference this May, promoting Brooklyn Enterprise Park to UK and international investors. I'm happy to take any questions about the report and our activity today.
Thank you for that, Laurie. Also, thank you to the Economic Development team. I've been to a few of these sessions which are taking place, and I'm pleased with the action plan. We've got the objective, the outcome, the actions, and obviously measuring success. And as you say, you're going to get the KPIs. I think at the meeting within the new year, the new council year, we get the KPIs coming through. What I would say is particularly pleased on the startup success. We've had these different workshops between them, and there are a number of businesses come forward, and particularly a number of businesses which are run by ladies, and some really good ideas that are coming through. And it definitely helped them. We had a business briefing recently down at the Holiday Inn. About 45 businesses turned up, and a number of them were people who come on the startup program. So it was great to see that. I'm going to move the recommendation set out on page 29 of the agenda. Do I have a second of that? Yes, I will second. Okay. Do you want to reserve your right to speak? Do I need to? No. That's right. No problem. Okay. We'll go to questions. Councillor Hurst, I'll go to you first.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to Laurie and the team. There's an awful lot to commend in this action plan. A lot of really good initiatives, get some positive feedback from people I know around the town who say what we do, and so the business is actually very much in the right direction, which is going to be great. And frankly, looking at the plan, you are going to be very, very busy as we go ahead. It is a hugely active plan that you have laid out in front of us here. I have a couple of questions. One is really around Mile the Road. This is something I kind of raised as well in Clapton the other day, where their part of what's now Pride in Place was levelling up, then became Plan for Town, whatever you want to call it. The investment in towns that really are being left behind at the moment. And as you know, we have one of those for Harlow and Canby at the moment in the county. The feedback that we got there, and I think the same is true here, was that town centre safety is a big factor. And the consultants were keen to executive talk about health and well-being instead, and not too much about safety. But I'm not reading much in here about what it is that this plan is doing, working with partners such as, and I should be very interested in this one, Commissioner, with community safety partners like police and fire and rescue, through the CSP, to actually make the town centre both be and feel safe. It's a pretty safe place anyway, but we do get feedback that it is one of the things that people find discomforting. The other bit of feedback I had was really, it's good to see from this plan what works best. So, what is actually best value for money in terms of the interventions that you're laying out here? Are there some things that we know are pretty much guaranteed to lead to more startups, lead to more footfall, lead to higher value activity, and some which are more peripheral? It's not possible to decipher that from the plan you put in front of us. I really appreciate if you could expand on that a bit. And then probably the most concrete bit is simply if you look at the pages 35 to 37, where you're laying out the success measures. And as you say, you're going to come back with KPIs for last year back in the summer. But what we haven't got here is a baseline and a target. What is it that we're working from, and what scale difference do you think we can make? And that doesn't have to be a precise set decimal place or anything, but generally, is it something we can make a significant difference to, bring in a measurable number of additional businesses, or are we hoping to stop a decline, or how do you see it working in terms of baseline and target? So 3 points really, please.
Okay, thanks, Sir. Thank you. Some good points here. Laurie, do you want to answer? No, I've got a couple of points.
around the county. So we're working very closely with the Grove Connected Business Improvement District, which, as you know, is working very closely with Essex Police, with the CCTV team here at the council, with the Community Safety Partnership. So there's a lot of joined up working around that partnership. So really that's how the economic growth team is working with the bid. So we're not doing that, our team is not delivering that directly, but we are working with other partners to make sure that we're making our towns and just as safe as they can be. I had a question about the KPIs and how we're measuring what is actually working. We're actually crunching those numbers as we speak, as projects are coming to a close. I think you'll see in the report that a lot of what we're going to be delivering in 26-27 is an extension of what we have been delivering this year. So once we have that baseline in place, then we'll be able to set the appropriate measures of success for 26-27.
Thanks for that. Well, yeah, I'll just make a couple of points. I think on the town centre safety side of things, we are very, very fortunate to have the Grove Connected town managers that made a massive difference, particularly shoplifting. They work very closely, obviously, with the police, very good coordination with CCTV. We recently had a case, I think it was raised the other night at the budget meeting, where some thieves were apprehended at the William Underway car park because they were trying to leave the car park. They couldn't get through the barrier, and the police turned up, and I think about £10,000 worth of property, which was recovered. So it does work. That's without having to go over the cameras. I think that, as I say, with the Rangers, they are doing a tremendous job. What I will ask, and I know you're involved first, you're wearing a different hat, and it's probably an operational matter, but I think from the police visibility perspective, we certainly need more visibility in our town centre. There are some serious issues, and Councillor Barrett raised this, and obviously it was touched on with regard to the antisocial behaviour in the Moxfield car park because of graffiti. We do seem to have a group of young lads who are causing some problems on a regular basis. It's not just happening, it's been going on for a period of time now. And a lot of police are working with others to try and deal with it. But it's an issue that has got to be sorted because a number of residents and their lives badly affected. So we need to look at that.
If I may just come back on that, Chair, I think that safety partnership, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. I did recently have a couple of residents complain there were too many police officers in the town centre, but there we are.
Well, they may be or not. So we've got to difference of opinion there. I think in terms of your other point, in terms of what works best, I mean, it is a good point to raise. My personal view is it is still quite early days, very early days. I mean, if you remember the economic development strategy, we decided entrepreneurs, startups, skills, sustainability, growth, those are the things that we decided to move on to. And I think we've really got to see just what happens. I mean, for me, I think on the entrepreneurial side, the startup, it's going to be what comes out of this, where do people go on to as they develop the businesses. So let's see what happens. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for second the economic development team. It's really quite exciting to see what's been achieved. And in turn, it's actually really positive to see that across our 3 high streets, we are below the baseline for empty shops, and especially when we know it takes a government house to achieve business, effectively for businesses and what we're trying to do at white hall, whatever we want to call it, which is closed and unfortunately unavailable due to many factors that we cannot control as a council and business for high street, etc. So I think they're fantastic figures to see positive. And I think the interesting point that I think, and I agree with what the council has to say, is that a big part of the strategy has to be the collaboration strategy. Because to achieve economic growth, you need to line up with the business, like to take your vote, line up with the police, that each of those kind of, I've had 3 days, so I've made 4 late, and I'm unfortunate for that to that. But each day you lose one and it will fall down. So on a practical basis, that collaboration is really positive to see, in that sense. And the other thing I think, and I think it would be really good for us, and sort of those KPIs to see some your output and your targets, that your prognosis is exactly right in terms of the type of measurement, but it would be quite good to see actually what do we think okay, good and great looks like, because then we can actually see putting 35,000 into the first round has led to X, but 60,000 led to X and Y. So maybe up the funding there, reduce it there. I think that's why we look at things out for first and working out where we are. And I don't think that's an unreasonable or necessarily difficult thing in terms of all of us want the town to grow as fast as possible in an appropriate, safe and sustainable way. So for me, post-reference plan is very positive to see. It's very organised and appropriate, and I genuinely also like that it remains the economic growth plan, not the economic development plan. Because developing the economy is fine, but growing it's the only way we're actually going to get better and further as a town. So thank you for that.
Thanks for mentioning that, Councillor Brown. Thanks. Growth. That's what we want to see. Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm going to have to abstain on this item. There are many things in here which I do like and I do agree with, but I do think that there are many issues which are quite important which are not being addressed and should have been in this report. I'll touch on a few of them. So the ones I do support, obviously, are the Crown Rangers investment. I think that's worked very well, but I'm very, very keen to invest in the Bakery Centre to make that a magnet for shoppers. But the things that I think that should have been in there and should have been considered, and I think I've raised some of them in different meetings previously, there is no mention, I believe, and I'm happy to be corrected because Laurie knows the fact much better than I do. There's no mention of what the council can do to work with partners to address traffic congestion across the borough. I do think if you look at economic growth, the ability that a lot of us have to get across the borough affects how much business we can do. Small independent traders stuck in the queue of traffic only on the road. I don't think this council has really engaged with anyone actively to look at that issue recently. I would also say that whilst we may have the requisite number of banks currently, even after NatWest leave in May, so that we can't trigger the application for a banking hub, I think we should be doing the groundwork right now, because we all know that the direction of travel is going to be going in that way, and I hope that I see Councillor Westall's hand up. Perhaps someone's got some good news the other side, and that's being worked on, but I think it should have been mentioned in this plan, and if it isn't in that plan, it should be added. I also think that we should be looking at cumulative impact assessments on, for example, vape shops. I think it really does not do benefit the borough in any way to have vape shops setting up on our three high streets. I really do think there's more of them than I would care to have already, and I wouldn't like to see any more. I think that there is a process available to councils to restrict certain businesses setting up where they feel that that's going to cause a problem locally. And my final two suggestions are that we should also in this report be mentioning that we will start to engage with the partners in terms of improving mobile phone coverage across the borough. I think that would aid economic growth. And I also think that we should again be working with partners to look at safety issues in terms of people who are coming into our borough via our railway stations and who are jumping the barriers, who are then committing crime and then leaving. That is not helping the economic viability of our small businesses particularly, and even our major retailers. And I think we ought to have some stuff around those themes in this report. So I'm going to abstain, and I would ask you to perhaps go around and take a few of those ideas and work with them where you can, add them into a second revised draft and bring it back in due course. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barlow. I mean, it's one of those ones where you've probably touched a wide range of areas there. Do they come under the Economic Growth Action Plan? It's open to people who have views on that. Some might think they do, some might think they don't. I think you've also touched on ones, there's the old adage in life, things you can do, things you influence, things you do not a lot about. And, we'd have to look at those in that sphere as well in terms of what exactly can the council do. Because there are certain things which are our gift and others are not so much. In terms of the number of banks, we have looked at the banking hub. That's obviously something we are fully aware of. We know what's happening in other areas. We are not anywhere near at the moment the situation where a banking hub would be relevant in Oakwood, because we have a number of places who provide banking. We have a number of building societies, so we haven't reached that stage yet, but it's certainly something that we have, on our radar, and we certainly have up our sleeve. In terms of the mobile side of things, I think if there are specific areas where mobile coverage is bad, we had this issue before with internet coverage in certain parts of the borough, where that can be quite tricky. If there are areas that we know of, then obviously specific areas always flag up. I mean, I think that's very, very useful, internet and mobile phone coverage. And on the safety issues with the rail stations, it's a source of great concern. I'm wearing one of my other hats. I'm the chair of the Bus and Rail Users Group, and security down at the station is a major concern at Brentwood Station, because often the barriers are unmanned, or there's no one there. So it's not surprised there is this problem. Who should take up that role? Should it be the police? Should it be others? I don't know. I mean, we haven't got that resource at the moment to cover the station as well. But I understand the point that you're saying. So I think if we can look at some of those, Rory, see where they fit in, see where potentially we can do anything about anything, we'll certainly have a look. Okay, I'll look down to Lewis next.
Thank you, Laurie, for your work here with the team. My question is, I think probably taking Roger's question and asking it in a different way. If there were two of these projects that you would pinpoint for going forward that had the most impact, what would they be and why?
That's a very good question. I think it's difficult to narrow it down to two. I would say definitely the Smart Start program has real legs. But I think it is also important to note that you're seeing the second year action plan of a 3-year strategy. So we've laid the foundation over the next 2 years based on the feedback that we get from businesses who are taking part in the various support programs. But we're receiving very good anecdotal feedback right now from the Smart Start participants, and we will be doing a formal evaluation at the end of the program next month. So I think that's a program that really does seem to be making a real difference. The other big project that we have coming up is, of course, the Creative Wayfinding project, where we will be installing all new street furniture across Brookwood, Tinfield, and some in Waitstone, and that's going to take considerable resource for our team to get installed, but it will make a real difference.
So you've highlighted the Smart Start program. What's the feedback that you've got, and why is it such positive feedback? What's your initial thoughts on it?
I think a lot of businesses just don't know where to get started with finding information. So I think it's been really helpful for them to be in a room with experts where they feel reassured that they are getting the correct advice, and that they're being signposted to sources of support that will really help them to grow. What's also happening is there's a lot of peer networking that's happening. We're seeing people setting up their own WhatsApp groups and talking to each other on a regular basis, meeting for coffee afterwards. And sometimes that's just as powerful as being in the room listening to the experts.
Well, just on that point, I had a meeting with one of them the other day in Blackpool, one of the startup businesses, and she said exactly the same point, Chloe, about the WhatsApp group. They've got a WhatsApp group. The fact is, they're all in together. A lot of them all starting at the same time. They're all on the same journey, and they're really finding it useful having other people sharing that. Because often when you start a business up, you are on your own. Who do I go to? Where do I go to? Signpost it. So I think that's a very good point there, definitely. Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. Just talking about, I've got an issue in with the type of economic growth. How is that actually going to be measured? Normally, economic growth is measured by GDP per capita and the percentage increase year on year. So I'm not even sure that we should be calling it economic growth. And also some of the outcomes. Increase in the local startup success rate. Do we know what the current percentage is? So it's, for me, a lot of these sort of outcomes are a bit worried. So I'd rather see specific numbers on what success looks like. Thank you.
Okay, Rory, did you want to just cover that? know we're going to come back with KPIs, aren't we, at the next meeting, but if you could just clarify, I think Councillor Rose made a point as well, it's on the measurement side, it's the start point and the finish point. Exactly. You need to know where you're starting from. Any thoughts on that?
So, Councillor, we did prepare a baseline report before we launched the strategy. So we actually have a lot of that information. So in 3 years' time, we will be able to measure where we ended up and where we started.
Thank you. So we'll know how many more startups there will actually correspond to economic growth rate.
Very okay. Yeah.
I'm here as sales director tonight, but I'll take that hat off for a moment just to answer this. So, as you will be aware, it's incredibly difficult to measure economic growth. And, you know, we have interventions by council only go so far to influencing economic growth. So, you know, what Laurie and the team are doing is the bits they can, but to be honest, if we were seeking out to measure economic growth, we have no idea whether our interventions are impacting that or whether there's other interventions and factors. So it's quite a difficult one, and I think what Laurie and the team have done by setting some KPIs and benchmarking is measuring the things that we can actually impact. There may be other external factors, so it's a very, very difficult area, and I can't think of one council that can actually measure economic growth per se. We can measure the bits we can make a difference with.
Thank you. Obviously, international governments can't measure economic growth. So this is why having it in there just think it's switched over. I'm sure I like.
Well, I think we'll just have to take a disagree with administration, God administration, we're calling it economic growth. And I think also the other way to measure it is look at what other councils, go to some other councils, see what they're doing. See what Chelmsford, Battersea, some of the other ones in Essex are doing compared to our economic development strategy, and compare that. And I would say ours is very, very strong against the competition in Essex, very strong. But if you've got evidence that others are better, then let us know. Okay. Sorry? Yeah, no problem at all. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. I'd like to thank Laurie for, if you like, the headings and, you know, the effort that obviously goes into all this, and I know what work she does outside with the Brentwood business groups and so forth. So it's very good. But unfortunately, reading it and my experience, I had retail shops at one stage, and quite a long time ago, and really as far as starting up in retail of the shop centres, the high street of the shops, you've either got two sorts of people. You've got people who want to start, shall we say, from nothing and a dream, or you've got people who are entrepreneurial, have money with a dream, and come in and start something up, and hopefully they make a good business out of it, and they don't lose too much money, and they carry on, and they're successful. For the small guys, usually have very good ideas and open up shops that, you know, people want. But there is a big, big problem. All those headings there are great, but from a high street point of view, when I had retail shops, the rent was whatever it was, but rates were about a quarter of the rent, and you felt that was affordable. Now you have rent which is quite high, and rates that sometimes are slightly higher than the rent you're paying. So really, it doesn't matter how much we offer here. The biggest offer for new businesses, if they go 2 or 3 years or whatever is considered, I don't think the council is in a position to do this, but with you know, a rate-free period, and that's what bolsters people's efforts to get into the high street, because they can see a sum of money that they can afford to put into their business and try and start it up. So the biggest drawback for retail at the moment is rates.
far as I'm concerned. It's a killer. And I'm sure you won't be surprised that item 1.3, the final dot on the page on that paragraph, support carbon savers and so forth. Well, I think the High Street supports that already in their energy costs, and for anything added to that, and considering the council is spending quite a lot of money on carbon savings, I can't support that particular item either. But as I say, as far as the High Streets are concerned, and trying to promote people to come there, the biggest problem and the biggest drawback stopping them actually starting a business is the amount of rates they have to pay.
Next, I've got Councillor Whittle. Please, I'll just pick up some of the points that have been made by members of the opposition. It's quite interesting. I detect a difference of opinion, which I'm not sure that they've really taken on board. Councillor Hurst, you were asking for evidence of bang the buck, basically, what really is effective. And then Councillor Barber gives us a shopping list of things that, frankly, I think would be a massive waste of time for officers. Can our economic development team really tackle traffic congestion? Is that going to be an effective way of spending their money and their time? I don't think so. I think that the opposition needs to have a chat amongst itself about what they're really looking for. There are a couple of specific points I wanted to pick up. The banks have let us down. They let Shenfield down very badly. The banks are meant to have a last bank standing policy. But there was a last bank standing in Shenfield. It was called Barclays. And they pulled out. And when I challenged them, when I wrote to the Chief Executive, I got a letter back from someone way down in the hierarchy saying, you've got a post office. Well, that didn't last much longer, did it? So the banks have they don't stick to one policy. And their policy on hubs is very clear, very specific, and as Councillor Kendall said, we're a long way from Trinity. If there is any banking facility left in the town, they will not countenance a banking hub. So again, it would be a waste of our time and energy to try and pursue that, frankly. Sad, but that's the case. They won't entertain it. While we have Halifax, we have Lloyds, we have Nationwide, Saffron, any one of those remains, that's it. Council banking hub and non-existent. So let's not waste time sort of chasing dreams at the end of the rainbow, because we could raise expectations that can never ever be delivered. The stations, again, we've been let down by other people. The stations should have been redesigned. Shenfield should have been redesigned. And if it was, then they'd be able to manage the security of the station much more efficient. It really does need upgrading with the huge footfall it gets because of the Elizabeth line. And why would we quibble with helping businesses reduce their carbon footprint? Because part of that is going to be reducing their energy costs. Surely that's 100% beneficial to those businesses, and we know that many businesses want to engage with that. In Ingatestone, we've got the community energy project off the ground, and the businesses want to engage with it. The businesses, they want to be part of the community enterprise business that should come out of this if all goes well. Actually, want to put solar panels on their roof, because they want to be part of it. They want to contribute to making our communities cleaner, greener, and more sustainable, and saving themselves and residents money on energy costs along the way. What is not to like about that? Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor. So I think you've highlighted a number of probably key differences between the Joint Administration and the opposition, because we have within our plan the carbon savings and green growth ISA plan. It says quite clearly there, encourage local businesses to adopt sustainable practices and green technologies. And we have an officer who's reaching out to businesses to help them with that. Now, it may be the opposition don't agree with that, and not
in. So all different society, Lloyd, HSBC, whatever it may be, is unfortunate. But the counterparty assurance, we have been restoring and completing that activity and learning from other areas such as Inmate which regrettably, when it put its application for its banking hub, was told that it waited too long and it had been proven that the bank capabilities were not needed because businesses had survived without them, which is unfortunate, but in retrospect, a lesson for all of us, whether they are councillors, MPs or community groups, that actually if we have a concern, get in early. It's better to apply and have an answer of no than not apply and not get an answer than not get an answer of yes.
Thank you. That's great. Just to confirm one thing, I mentioned it earlier on when we were talking about that. I did write on behalf of the council with Emma Billings help and support to NatWest Bank regarding the closure. So a letter has gone from the council regarding that closure and expressing our concerns and the impact it's going to have, particularly on the elderly people who visit the town centre. There's a lot of older customers of the NatWest, and it will make a big impact for them. I think what's very sad is that they are suggesting us to people go to either Romford or Paddington, which is a fair way, but also they're not being particularly helpful for the staff, because the staff have been told unless they go to Romford, there won't be any jobs. So this is what we want to hear.
I can just come back briefly. I mean, resist the temptations of the reply to the worst one. That on the banking side of things, I think we need to differentiate between those banks that offer a counter service and those that don't. I'm an HSBC customer, and there is no counter service in the HSBC. We are also NatWest customers, and there is always a queue of Brentwood residents wanting to use that service whenever you go into that branch. And so I effectively do feel that we are losing our last proper bank in the terms that most people recognise it. And I do think that it's not, I do think getting on the front foot and trying to push and persuade is a good thing. I don't think it's a waste of time, truthfully. I don't think it's the 4 or 5 things I suggested were a waste of time. In all of those, if you actually put the effort into it, if you cure the traffic jams across Brentwood, you help the environment and you help the net zero ambitions that you have. So, you know what? Have a look at it and don't look at it in party terms, because there were some reasonable ideas in there, and our residents will want us to focus on some of those things.
Thank you, Councillor Barber. I'm going to go now to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. Abstentions. Okay, so that's carried. Thank you. Right, we're going to go on to item 7, which is the infrastructure final statement for 24-25. The report begins on page 41 of the agenda. Those of you who attended the scrutiny committee may remember, I think this went to scrutiny, yeah? And it is the same report, so if you haven't seen it before, that's when you saw it. Is there anything you wish to add?
Thank you. Just as I said, this is the 6th infrastructure funding statement that has been produced by Brentwood because of the financial year ending the 31st of March 2025. It's the second year that Brentwood's ISS includes both STIL and Section 106, but you'll see, of course, within the report and in the reporting that we have entered into agreements for significant amounts of Section 106 and STIL in the year 2024-2025, but that money hasn't yet or haven't come into the bank account as of the 31st of March, and there's always a delay between entering into those agreements and then picking up the trigger points when those arise. So this is a factual report which just covers the amount of money that we've entered into, the amount of money that we're holding, and money that we've spent in year.
Thank you, students. I'm going to move recommendations for that on page 41 of the agenda. Yeah, I'm going to move that first. Do I second that? I should second the recommendation. That's right. It's good. How's that?
It's delighted to see little Vice Chair, so please just speak over the light.
Very good.
I'm very expected it is. Thanks very much for the report. Just, I
So I'm actually a little bit confused, having looked through the report and the details. At one point, it's described as an infrastructure delivery plan, and we're asked in the recommendation to approve an infrastructure delivery plan. But then the title is an infrastructure funding statement, and what we're actually given is an infrastructure funding statement, which I would have thought would have been more appropriate to note rather than approve. And then on the infrastructure funding statement, the screening very succinctly and clearly made the point that these are multi-year arrangements. Yeah? And this is very much a one-year report. It doesn't look back. It gives us no comparators. It tells us that we received 1.89 million, or we were notified of 1.89 million investable funds in this year, and we collected and spent 55,000. And it tells us that on S106, so that was still on S106, we were given 6.96 million and spent zero. I don't believe we've really spent nothing. What we've spent is nothing of the money that was due to come in out of the year in question. And given that we have got previous year's data, this report would be so much more informative if it covered, I would say, ideally 3 years rather than 1. If it would tell us what had come in 23, 24, and 24, 25, and which bits of that have been spent. And okay, so we're sitting on 2.7 million from last year. It's not clear to me from this whether that's all we're sitting on, or whether we're sitting on 2.7 million from 24, 25, and some extra stuff from 23, 24 or previous years. And we don't get a clear picture as to what the triggers are, as to when we are going to be able to disperse this money, or whether we are actually in danger of having to reimburse it. So this could be a deeply meaningful report. I mean, I welcome the information that we've got. It's more than we used to get before we started getting it. That's great. But it could be so much more helpful, and it could really help us to do our job, which is to hold officers to account for the effective administration of this money. Thank you.
I think in fairness, Councillor, to make some very fair points, actually, I'm going to ask you to think in terms of what can be done, because obviously there is a requirement to produce this report. We've taken on board Councillor's point. Is that possible to incorporate that, or is that a totally different issue, or here's your thoughts, please?
Yeah, so first of all, just thank you for pointing out you're right, and if we could amend the recommendations should say infrastructure funding statements, so I clearly had infrastructure delivery plans, which are right or different thing on the brain at the time, so apologies for that. So if we could amend the recommendation to be clear you are approving the infrastructure funding statement rather than an infrastructure delivery plan. In terms of what's in the report, you're right, an infrastructure funding statement is a government required document. Government sets out the information that we have to include, so it's very specific, and it wants that each year so that it can compare council, so it can collect the data in the same way and do it that way. So this report is purely just an infrastructure funding statement. Through the APS committee, we have approved last year a wider process for delivering and reporting on soil and section 106. So that has been approved by Council Barrett's committee, and that will be starting in the next financial year. So there's a whole process. So the IFS is a government required document which is very factual and just sets out data for the year. What there will be is a separate process around how we're spending and collecting money, which then is viewable and available for members to input into and to get that information out. So there's two slightly different things.
Okay, Councillor, do you want to come back on that?
I accept the explanation. It still is in the situation. I'm not sure what I'm actually doing this evening. If I were noting the IFS, I'd probably notice, but if I'm actually being asked to approve this, I don't think I'll be able to.
just going to keep taking board some accounts of this point. I don't know whether it's going to be covered in what we're doing with APA. Yeah. I don't know that. I can see the value of a sort of 2-3 year picture of where things are going, yeah, or what's happened or what's in the pipeline, as opposed to just a 1 year. And I don't know if that, you might say, well, that's a completely separate report, I don't know. But if it's possible to have that, so in some respects, if we're doing this on a statutory basis, because we have to do this report, that's one thing, but it's having the wider picture is another thing. I don't know how feasible or possible that is. Councillor Barrett, not the as well.
Yeah, I think there's two elements to this. Could the amendment be to approve the submission of the budget representative statement? So I think that's what Councillor Hurst is saying. What we're approving is this is being submitted to the government in the required structure. But then potentially an R2 that says future occurrences of this, an update was provided on how the statement is being compiled with an appropriate comparison window. If we're going to APS, there's no reason there couldn't be an appendice that actually gives that information as well, so we can compare it. I don't think we could, if this is a required document for us to submit in this standard format, we should be submitting it, and I think Councillor Hurst to the point of there's a difference between submitting it and understanding it, and that's the slight gap we have right now. But nevertheless, I think it is clearly an accurate statement. We need to submit it, but there's potential for an R2 here that says future representative of infrastructure funding statement, there will be an attached appendices report explaining where money has been spent.
I can understand that, and that was a very interesting and good suggestion. I'd probably actually made the IFS the appendix to the report that was more fulsome, because we're going to be more interested in the bit which isn't just the statutory requirement. But if this primary recommendation is amended to say to approve the submission of the IFS, then of course what can go with that? Yeah.
We will
recognising that a more fulsome report, ideally covering the 2 years, would be a recommendation to a good thing of that for the future.
To show we are fleet of foot, we will certainly take on board those suggestions or recommendations. So the first one will be the submission of this report, which we need to do. Secretary and the R2 will be the point regarding.
I think they said rather than do it thematically, to agree a process between the chair and the lead member of the opposition for future submissions. That would be easier, won't it, rather than us trying to get that text. Yeah.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, still 106 and etc. Almost two different categories in the form of collection and expenditure. You might put me in my place here, but I have a problem with the report in its present form, as does Councillor Hurst, because the finances that are mentioned and the amounts that probably go to county or where still is concerned will go to the parish councils. If you're looking at the amount that's being collected on 106 and Sill, you have to go back to the planning documents to find out what the allocation is. This report and further reports will give you the overall sums that we've collected from Sill or 106, but it doesn't tell us whether that's the sum that's come to us and then we've reallocated to county, etc., or if it's been reallocated to parish. So I'm not really clear which way it's done. It either tells us the amount we have received, which is ours, and which we are going to use, or the amount we've received from planning, and then how we've distributed it. At this moment in time, we've got figures here, but they don't actually mean anything to me, Because I don't know if they're the final figures that's come to us, or the figures that have come to us and there's more money that will be allocated elsewhere.
I absolutely think Councillor Parker for what you're saying. I think it looks on those reports, this is no disrespect to whoever is obviously had to compile it, but it does look like it's almost like a box ticking exercise where having to fill in a report. Yeah, it's a sanction report, but in terms of what it actually tells you, well, look, to be totally honest with you, it gives you an overall summary in terms of where things are at. But in terms of the detail, which is what a lot of people want, when we come to this moment, that's the problem. Just go to Councillor Lewis and I'll come back to Councillor Lewis.
Thanks, I'm not sure if he says it's something that you're at, but I think we will agree there could be some useful additions in the future. I'll actually talk about it subsequently, and I'll feed my comments to Gareth and you can take it forward as necessary for you.
Councillor, can we come back to you?
Just briefly, I'm going to say, MSG actually have a team of analysts to pull this stuff together and do multi-year comparators. They make it work in all through. That's why it's a series of boxes that they feed into a spreadsheet. We can still do much harder than they do.
Well, I think as I say, we can discuss between servers, I'm sure, and come up with something which is more relevant to all members with more detail. So that's when we can discuss that and come back.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the infrastructure funding statement is just the money that is passed to Brentford Borough Council, so anything that is secured directly by county will be published in Essex County Council's infrastructure funding statement. But if you look on the statement itself, questions HI and HII. So HI is the amount of money which is passed to neighbourhood areas, so you can see that in the year we've passed just over £1,300 to Ingatestone Parish Council, and also HII is any spend that we've passed to third parties, and this year there has been no spend to third parties, so this is all, so the money within here is purely money that is available for Brentford Borough Council to spend.
Right, I'm going to go to the vote on the amended recommendation that we discussed before. So it's to submit the infrastructure funding statements for 24-25, and then R2 is for discussion between the chair and the lead member of the opposition in terms of the wider report the members are looking for. Okay, all those in favour, please show. Okay, unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, item 8 is the South Essex Parking Partnership Joint Committee Agreement. The report begins on page 53 of the agenda. Mr. Anderson, do you have anything you wish to add?
No, again, I think it's when the time to take any questions.
Thank you. Okay, now I know we have Councillor Parker has a lot of experience on STEP, and others of us who've been on this council for a long time know all about it. But I thought you might tell us, Councillor Parker. You might raise that during the discussion. What I would say, looking at this in very, very simple terms, whatever people's thoughts, good or bad, different regarding how STEP operates, if you look at the facts before us, it's almost to me like a no-brainer. We have a recommendation there. I'm going to move the recommendation because I think it's a very sensible recommendation in terms of taking things forward with where we are with LGR. And I'm not going to second that.
I will second the recommendation.
Right. Okay. I've got Councillor Hurst first and then Councillor Parker.
Yeah, noting the Vice Chair's comment, perhaps with an equal level of enthusiasm, I have to say, this just has to make sense, doesn't it? STEP may not be perfect, what is in life. Perhaps it's not even as perfect as some of the things that we know about, but it is what we've got. It would be daft to be trying to mess around with it at this stage, given what's happening in the broader government. So I certainly think this is a good recommendation.
Councillor Parker.
Yes, so I'm not going to take it on, but the background to a certain extent is that when it was formed, obviously, but the number of boroughs that actually contributed to it was two, which was Chelmsford and ourselves. And through the efforts of SET, they brought that up to more or less everybody contributes to the fund now. With the work they've done on the other boroughs that weren't contributing. I remember that when we gave up our own parking orders and the on-street parking, when SET was formed, we actually made £18,000. That was our profit. So if you take the money that we received from SET, about 180,000, I think, a couple of years ago, we haven't lost out. You know, even working on only having 18,000 per year. I must say that Chelmsford officers who run SET are exceptionally good, and they make a really grand job of running it. As I say, people might find fault with it in some areas, but it's been a success. They've got quite a bit of money in the bank to carry on the services, and hopefully, if it's not spoiled by the unitary, there'll be other payouts further down the line that we've not expected. So, yes, I'm fully in favour of continuing our involvement with it.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you. I'm not regarding myself. I generally agree with that. Personally, then, in terms of we don't really have much option in this, in that we'd be mad to do anything else. At the same time, I'm not, it's really slightly different about the car park, I'm not thinking it can be anything set. And to an extent, I actually think raising hundreds of thousands of pounds of our high street fines is a sign of failure in car parking enforcement, because the success factor is cars not parking on our high street illegally. Rather than necessarily collecting money from it, and in turn, I think if we manage it more locally, there could be potential for us to put more warnings on to stop that happening. I think we're zero overall, but a 3 at High Street, and to point out to Barton made, having a High Street block the traffic flow more freely would be of more benefit for us. Nevertheless, in the time frame we've got, we don't really have a choice practically. If we were to bring it back to ourselves, it would cost us a fortune. It wouldn't be as good for a period, because that always happens when we start something new, and then we'd be giving it to someone else, to another problem for them to begin with. This is the only pragmatic option that we have, and whether we like it or not, the other alternative is terrible. So, there we are. We're stuck with, a very bad place and a nerve place. And regrettably in politics, nerve is often the best we get.
Councillor Parker.
The maximum set was that if we didn't take any parking fines, we succeeded. The success would have been that we weren't issuing any tickets. That was what you look for, but the public doesn't allow for that. The only other option, we had a few laughs at SET about it, was to keep on increasing the fines to such an extent people wouldn't even dare go out in their cars, because in case they got stopped and got fined, you'd never live through that political storm that would cost. So, unfortunately, Councillor Barrett is right, but the problem lies with the public, including myself, who get fines because we don't do what we should do.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear that. And this is Councillor Parker's point of view. Okay, we're going to move to the votes. All those in favour, please show. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Just an update. We were going to have the presentation this evening by Bob Manson, regarding the Wrexham bit. Unfortunately, I believe he had an accident on the way here. He's okay. But he's not going to be able to attend the meeting this evening. So we're going to defer Rob's presentation. Okay? Yeah. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to defer the presentation side, because I'd like him here, to do his presentation. But we are going to take the other item. We will take the other item on Wrexham before we move to the pink session. Okay? So that will come before the pink session. Thank you.
I personally sympathy with Mr. Manso, and I hope he has come to know the harm. I hope this all is conscious and actually Some challenge with what you just proposed, because of course item 13 comes out of item 5. And having had a discussion with Mr. Mansur about the implications of the changes in legislation on the 1st of April, would have made it that much easier to agree item 13, which as I understand it is being put forward unchanged. And one of my key questions was going to be, how can we have an unchanged policy on rates, discounts, if the government's changing rates, discounts on the 1st of April?
What we will do is, I'm going to take, I know we've got Mr. Dixon and Sarah here, who are also capable of taking questions on the reps and bends side of things, okay? So we will take that lesson, and so we will take, appreciate what you're saying, but we haven't got Rob here to do that, okay? But we will be taking the item because we need to take that item tonight and make a decision tonight on the extra report, okay? Taking the item of decision, we need to make a decision on that particular point, okay? Hopefully we can address those points that you want to raise, but we're not doing it now, we'll do it a little later in the agenda, okay? We will come back to it, okay? We're going to move on now to item 9, which is the draft parking strategy framework, and this report begins on page 61 of the agenda. You have the recommendations R1 to R3 on your actual agenda pack, but you've had a sheet given to you this evening, which includes R4, recommendation R4, and this is a cross-party working group. It's formed to consider the findings of the draft parking strategy framework for Brentford Borough and report back to a future meeting of this committee. So there are in fact 4 recommendations. Mr. Anderson, do you have anything you wish to add to start with?
Thank you, Chair. So yes, before members is a report outlining a framework for producing a revised and updated parking strategy. Just a couple of points for members. The parking strategy that's included in the appendix is the current parking strategy, just for reference. No new strategy has been written yet, hence the need to report the framework and the working group. I would stress that this is high level in terms of the themes within the report. It's not about going into detail at this stage, it's about agreeing the themes and the framework for the production of a new strategy, and then any work items that come out of the working group that need to be reported back to committee with a business case to support any future plans. Happy to take any questions.
Right. I'm going to move the recommendations on page 62 of the agenda on 1 to R4. I'm going to second that.
I will second.
Okay. Right, just before we get going, just want to put a few ground rules down so we know what we are discussing and what we're not discussing. Just in terms of what was agreed at the budget last week, the budget was approved with the car parking charges frozen for the next financial year, 26 to 27. We are not going to be changing the whole car parking charges just in case anyone asks. Those are the charges. We are still going to continue with the free half hour. We're going to continue with the free Sunday parking. Remote lanes to bring in on-street parking charges. No one needs to worry about that. So I want to make sure that people obviously are aware of that before we start off. We are also not going to be deciding our future car parking strategy this evening. Okay, that is not the purpose of it. We have this report before us, which is quite a lengthy report, and it's really to ask general questions and observations. We will be having this working group in the new council year, where we will be looking at each segment of the strategy framework, and I'm sure there will be areas where there will be cross-party agreement on that. So very interesting to see how we take that forward. So we'll open up to questions first of all. I've got Councillor Parker first, and then Councillor First, I believe. Okay, Councillor Parker.
Yes, Chair. Taking the items that you said that you're not going to do, and taking R1 on, I have a problem with it because I support it. I support the idea of a cross-party group. I'd like to know what you think the numbers will be made up with. But R1, if you read it as it basically it endorses the themes and options as outlined in this report as a framework for future decision making, develop a detailed strategy and action plan for delivery. Well, all those items that we're not going to do are in that report. So you're asking us to agree 1 to 4, but the one thing that stands out that I can't agree with is number 1, because it says that all the items, as I say, all the items that you suggest we're not going to look at, suggested in item 1 that we are. Let me be very, very clear. We've just set a budget, which is going to come into force from April for the new financial year. Okay? And I've made it very, very clear, car parking charges are not going to be changing, okay, in terms of what we've got going forward. This actual report here is for 26 to 2031, okay? That's the period it's going to be looking at, all right? It's obviously going to have to get over the initial period the next 2 years because we're going to find out in March, at the moment we're going to find out in March about LGR, what's happening with unitaries and everything else. So car parking is going to be thrown into the mix, I'm sure, with whoever we end up working with. That's what will happen, because we'll have to sit down in the office of administration and have discussions with those other councils on car parking. I'm laying that very clearly, though, this is what the situation is for the administration going forward. Right? Now, in terms of the options and themes outlined in the report, there's a lot of themes. It depends how detailed you want to get into the options. The consultants have come up with various suggestions as to what they might do on various parking analyses, for example, first half hour, Sunday parking, etc., etc. Okay? We are not changing that. We've got a very clear package over the next council year what we're doing. Okay? Now, what happens every year with the budget, and I'm sure you did this when you were in power, is you look at car parking charges in the round as a part of your budget. Okay? We did that this year, we did it last year, we did it the previous year, and we will always do that going forward. And if we have any changes, we will bring them to the committee, it will come to economic first, and then it will come to the full budget meeting. Okay? But I'm trying to make it as clear as I can, put a mark in that. It says about the things and options. There's a whole range of things in there. It's about widening car parking spaces, it's about EV charges, it's about overnight parking charges in the town centre. Are they the right rate? Are they the wrong rate? Those are things that the working group would look at, okay? And we would then come back with a detailed report, as it says here, detailed strategy and action plan, and also a detailed appraisal of those different points before any decisions are made. Okay? So, I tried to say that right at the outset because I knew exactly what you were going to say. Someone would look at this and go, oh, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. We are not changing the first half hour. We're not changing Sunday parking, free Sunday parking. It ain't happening. Okay? So, you can be clear on that right from the outset. Councillor Hurst.
Thank you, Chair. I think I do understand exactly what it is that you're saying in terms of process. I have to say, though, I do share Councillor Barker's concerns about what the list want. Okay, so you're not talking about abolishing the first half hour free parking as suggested on page 98 this year. But, page 85 does start a section, an extensive section of data around where we are, with option 1 proposals here, which are clearly intended to be the meat for this cross-party working group to consider. And there are a number of things in there, page 103 summarises them, which are very clearly proposals. I get the impression that the cross-party working group is intended to consider how, not whether. And there are some fundamental issues, I think, with that. page 65, if I may say so, use it again, page 65 makes it clear that the objective of this partnership strategy framework is to increase revenue to the council. What is so neatly and finally described as sustainability of the partnership point. In other words, more revenue for us. Its objective is not economic growth in the borough. And to that extent, I certainly won't be able to endorse the ins and options as outlined in this report as a framework for any future decision making without the detailed strategy and action plan for delivery. The report makes very clear, and indeed Mr. Anderson did in his brief summary from preamble, that we have a partnership strategy which was put together in 2022 on the basis of extensive work and data and analysis. And that is a partnership strategy from 2022 to 2032, not to 2026. You just said that it won't change anything in 26-27, so I guess what we're talking about is changing things for 27-28. We will be having elections, as far as we know them, certainly the proposal on the table, we will be having elections to a shadow unitary authority in May 2027. The work of that shadow unitary authority will be to do exactly what you're describing about homogenising and streamlining policies across the new unitary area. One of those will be parking. It strikes me as a phenomenal waste of time to head off and do this. Recommendation 3 suggests that this will support the development of further parking approach to the unitary authority. No, it's quite intended to preempt any development of consolidated parking approach and make sure we've got one for Brentwood, which is already laid down. If you were talking about gathering evidence to feed into the development of consolidated parking approach, I might be able to support it, but as it is, recommendation 1, I think, is fundamentally in the wrong direction. Recommendation 2 is fine. Recommendation 3 is, if anything, deceptive insofar as it is intended to say that we are supporting something which we are intended to preempt. And recommendation 4, to be spending the time doing that work when actually it's going to be done again a year later, strikes me as frustrating. So I'm afraid there's just no way out of it. I don't like the proposals, and I don't like the way forward. I'm not supporting this.
No problem at all. Mr. Anderson, let me clarify a few things. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just to clarify, in the slide, the proposals that have been put forward by the consultants are proposals that a scope was issued to the consultants of things that we wanted them to explore and provide evidence on. They have done that, and they have taken a step further in providing potential proposals or solutions that the council could adopt and move forward with. But they are just that, they are the consultants' proposals. They are not necessarily something that the council has accepted or looking to move forward to. They are merely data-based proposals.
I'm grateful to you saying that, Mr. Anderson, because no, I'm finished there. Thank you. I've tried to be very, very clear. These are consultants' proposals, okay? They're not the joint administration's proposals, they're consultants' proposals for a parking strategy framework, okay? If any of them come to life in any shape or format, they would come to this committee with all the detail, with all the facts behind it, okay? So, at the moment, okay, they are consultants' proposals. We have not endorsed them or embraced them at all. Okay, we've just seen the report. It's come before us as members, and that's where we're at. As simple as that. That's all I've got.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying, David, and also understand your concerns about the wording of recommendation 1. So I've got a suggestion for an amendment, if you're prepared to. Deleting authors in places it recognises, delete and options, and before framework, insert potential. So recommendation one would read, recognises the themes as outlined in this report as a potential framework for future decision making. So I think that captures, Chair, what you're saying and addresses Councillor Hurst's concerns, which I absolutely agree with, because we don't want to be saying we like too much in this report, because I think there's a lot that we don't like, and there are some bizarre comparisons in. I mean, I love the idea that we're compared to Tucalia. Perhaps we all ought to go on a site visit to see how parking works in Tucalia. Yeah. And on recommendation 3, what I would say in response to your concerns about that is that this is an opportunity for us to review our parking strategy, update it if we feel we need to, and then go into the new arrangement saying, this is what works for Brentwood. We have spent time looking at what works for Brentwood. This is what is best for us. And that's what we want the new unitary to recognise, that we've done the work, we know what good looks like for Brentwood, and we've then given ourselves, whoever is on the new unitary, a platform for pleading the case, arguing the case for our parking strategy to be retained, and perhaps, because it is so good, rolled out across the other local authority areas that we find ourselves partners with.
Thank you for that, Councillor. I will accept your suggestions regarding Part 1. I think it makes a lot of sense. It makes it a lot clearer in terms of where we were at. So it would be recognises the themes and options. So recognise the themes as outlined in this report as a potential framework for future decision making to develop a detailed strategy and action plan for delivery. Okay? That, I think, should appeal to Councillors Hurst and Parker. It doesn't, but it makes it very clear from our perspective. Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting to hear the amendment at this late stage. That amendment, unfortunately, doesn't satisfy me, because fundamentally, the proposals brought forward by the consultants, I would be interested to know how much we spent employing these consultants on this report for something that we say we may not even implement. If we're talking about wasting resources, spending external consultancy on a project that you're just going to pass on to the next unitary with no assurance that it will actually be implemented, and it sounds like a classic waste of money from my perspective. A couple of things I'll touch on. The report, the pricing recommendation sheet, is the one that really just disappoints me. Managed for availability. So we all know essentially that there is competition to use spaces, but we also know that people don't stay in the space just because they get 2 hours. They stay for as long as they need to complete their shop. And one of the reasons that we heard earlier on in the evening that there were so few voids in Shenfield is because there is flexible parking, and people can usually find somewhere. They might still drive around for a couple of minutes, but they can find somewhere to park. So the Shenfield model is very good. And in the past, there were politicians who advocated and installed, in fact, parking meters all the way down Hutton Road. And they were very unpopular, and we should be listening to our residents. Where it says use prices to promote more environmentally friendly travel, I assume that means you're just saying people should walk or cycle, and good luck with that, because the roads aren't particularly safe for cyclists these days. And that's not an option available to the elderly. So what we did, it was only a short while ago that the Joint Administration implemented and boasted about the 3-hour Sunday parking and how this was really going to transform our high streets. And you've got your consultants talking about even now withdrawing the free 30 minutes. In all honesty, there's mixed signals here. The administration really should take a lead. Either free parking encourages people to come and use our high streets, and it's a good thing. Yeah. In which case, you perhaps hear that's the line you were taking on the Sunday facility, which had a reoccurring loss of revenue ways, Councillor Kendall, or it doesn't. And I really do think also, you talk about widening the bays. We're obviously not going to widen the bays in the multi-storey because you can't, because the columns are physically only allow 3 cars to be parked in between them. But you're going to reduce the number of parking spaces across Brentwood. You're going to be charging people for things that they currently get for free. And how on earth is that compatible with actually helping and assisting economic growth in the High Street? It really is contradictory. And the fact that you've actually had this report put together by people who clearly don't know Brentwood very well, in my opinion, and at goodness knows what cost, I find very disappointing. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. I'm disappointed in your comments because what you're trying to do is conclude the situation. We have a report here that's been put together by consultants. Okay, now when you ask consultants for a report on anything, okay, it's very unlikely you're going to know the answers they're going to come up with. They've come up with obviously various suggestions and various things. This is their report, okay, that they have put forward for consideration. Okay, it is not endorsed by the Joint Administration. There's a number of things in there I've said quite clearly already will not be happening. You raised another one, and I knew you would do the Chelmsford charge on the Chelmsford Road. It ain't going to happen. Okay, I'm telling you that now. There are no plans whatsoever for on-street parking charges on the Chelmsford Road. So if we start sticking that in the leaflet, it ain't happening. Okay, it's on webcast from me. Okay, so sorry. No. Okay, you see, this is the problem, Councillor. It's a serious point. Because this is where things get misconstrued and taken out of context, okay? There is no plans whatsoever. This is the consultant's suggestions, okay? Which we're not endorsing tonight, and they're not happening, okay? I'm making it clear on those points. But what we have here, we have a number of proposals that come forward with. We can find out the cost on Sean Branson in terms of how much will be charged by the consultants. I suppose you could have a consultant come forward and you could tell them what you want in their report. We could have done that, okay? Or we could have asked them to look at it in the round and come up with their thoughts, which is what we've done, okay? We'd have come up in the round with their thoughts, and a number of them we, as the Joint Administration, don't agree with. Now, going forward, others may have a different view, but that's certainly not the view of this administration. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, unless I'm mistaken, the last cross-party working group on parking actually asked for this strategy report to come from consultants. That was one of our recommendations of the cross-party working group, is why it appeared. And unless I'm mistaken, at the same time, we asked that no sacred cows in this report, everything be considered. And partially that was because we were looking at elements when the recommendation of this was made, potentially that 3 hour and what impact that would have. And this report, to some extent, actually shows free parking can have a lot in retail loss as well as a retail benefit. But what's really important for this report is we've put a consultancy report to come back to the council that says the council would have made more money if we hadn't frozen parking charges, if we had removed Sunday parking. So actually, this demonstrates plain and simple from our budget, and unlike Councillor Barber who said you will, you plan to, you did. No, we have evidence of what we did. We had research that said we would make more money as a council if we raised parking charges. If we got rid of free parking, we started on free parking. And you know what we did? We said no. We followed the economics, we followed the uses the information for their own benefit, rather than looking at what we did, not what we couldn't have done.
Councillor Lewis.
I would ask the powers that be here to consider something that seems to have been forgotten out of all of this, which is car parking capacity. So now I'm going to go on a rant as a resident. So, number one, first and foremost, does anyone try to park at Chingford Station? It is our biggest source of revenue into the borough of people working in town. And I don't know how many people here work in town, but a couple of years ago you could park at Chingford Station at 8:30 perfectly fine. Now it's 8:40. And if you go there at 10:08, good luck, you'll get dozens and dozens and dozens of cars circulating the area trying to find somewhere parking. And with the Elizabeth line and housing growth and God knows what, the state of parking in our car park stations is woefully inadequate for the future. And if you go on a Saturday afternoon, even at 10:30, exactly the same thing is happening. You get dozens and dozens and dozens of cars going in and out and circulating the town, but God knows where they go. Maybe they go home and get a taxi, so maybe this is a business strategy for showing taxis, I'm not sure. The same thing goes actually to consider for Brentwood car park, where I never actually believed the 2022 paper with that spurious report about parking trends at Brentwood William Hunter Way car park. I think that was not impressive, and I said so at the time when we had some meetings on it, was it 3 years ago or something? And I think it's woefully inadequate, potentially, given the requirements for economic growth that we have. So I think the biggest issues for the town in terms of car parking are actually not even considered here.
I think you make a very, very good point there, that particularly regarding Shenfield, because the capacity in Shenfield for the NCP car park is a major, major problem. And it's one of those issues I think was touched on it earlier on by Councillor Worthwell, when we were talking about Shenfield Station and the basically the end of the Elizabeth line. We never got the investment, in my view, in Shenfield Station that we should have got from the government. At the other end of the Elizabeth line, there was a lot of investment. I think it was probably in Theresa May's constituency at the time. But it was a source of great frustration, and that's one issue to, I think, if it can be addressed, I think can be looked at capacity with regard to Shenfield and the car park. There is also comment, I know Councillor Gordon has raised this in the past, about the 3-hour period, and is there flexibility on that, particularly say in the evenings, if there are different activities, maybe football matches, whatever, to do anything on that. Those are some of the practical issues which I think should be looked at. Other issues in the report should be looked at are EV charges. Have we got too many? Do we need more? They should be looked at for the car parks. That needs to be looked at in detail. I disagree with Councillor Barber regarding the day widths. I think we do need to have a serious look at the day widths in the Cotswold Road car park, because it does put some people off from using it. Yes, we have got the pillars there, but is there scope to widen them to a certain level and still increase our revenue in that car park? What is the potential? What are the options for that car park? We all might have our own personal views, but let's look at that in the round. So there are some things in the report, certainly, that can be looked at. And there may be other administrations going forward who have a more open view of some of the suggestions that are coming forward regarding pricing and free parking, etc. But that's not the view of us. I mean, one of the suggestions in there is, I think, to charge £1 for Sunday parking. It used to be £1 to park on a Sunday in Lawrence car parks. Yeah? We did away with that. We scrapped it. We made it free parking. We certainly ain't going to go back to charging £1 again. Ain't going to happen. Yourselves, the opposition, came up with a suggestion for the first hour free, and the first things were put together for the budget on that. Well, that should, in my view, that should be looked at in the review. Okay? Let's have a look at that in review. What difference would that make? Is that the type of thing that would be supported
by retailers. I don't know how many retailers you spoke to before you came up with that suggestion, the opposition. I thought many, because the ones I've spoken to, are not in favour of the first hour free. So it'd be interesting to see who the conversation's been on that. But that's the type of thing that should be considered in any future review. Ms. Ramsden, any other comments?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, again, just to reiterate, the purpose of the report is to agree the themes and the framework for producing a new parking strategy. So whilst all the points raised by members are good and valid points and suggestions, the purpose of the working group is to start exploring those. So the report tonight is not necessarily focused on or agree individual items, it's to agree the themes and moving forward to establish the working group to actually look at all of those items, as the Chair has said, and then to bring those back with valid business cases to substantiate whether they are valid to go forward with or not.
Thanks for that. Someone asked a question, I'm going to come to you, Councillor, I'll put it down. Yeah, someone asked a question earlier on about the working group composition. We'll be looking at probably a 5-member working group, 3 administration, 2 opposition members on there. I think it's good to have input as wide as possible. So that's what we've been looking at there. Councillor Gorton, you've had a point.
Chair, thank you very much. Sorry, I think one of your statements a couple of minutes ago, you mentioned about parking on Chelmsford Road. I think you meant Hudson Road. There isn't any parking on Chelmsford Road. And certainly, Shenfield is a major issue, as Councillor West will tell you. There are 4 car parks within easy walking distance of the railway station, yet the residents, I do have an issue with car parks, cars parking on those roads for long periods of time, especially when there's a football on. Thank you.
I've spoken to many residents, Councillor West, who came down here and had a conversation, and I'm sure it's a great frustration, particularly on the football day, to understand that. And I think we do need to look at that. Another area we need to look at is the overnight parking charges. They should certainly be considered. Can we get more cars off the road into our car parks, particularly the town centre car parks, which are safe and secure environments? We've got the barriers, we've got ANPR, CCTV there. We need to look at all of that as well. And I think they had some ideas on that, didn't they? I'm sure, in terms of how we can encourage more town centre residents to perhaps use the car parks for that. So there's some good positive stuff in there, but there are some red lines, and we've saved those. Anyway, we've got 4 recommendations.
Can I call for a recorded vote, please?
A recorded vote, please, sure, if you want. Have you got enough people? So how many people do you need? 3, that's fine. Yep, no problem. Okay, so just so we're very clear what we've got on this, because didn't have any recorded votes, we don't want to get carried away. So R1, tell me if I've got this right, David, recognises the fees, okay, as outlined in this report, as a potential framework for future decision making to develop a detailed strategy and action plan for delivery. Okay, that's R1. Everyone clear on that? R2 agrees that further detailed appraisal, engagement and modelling be undertaken before any implementation decisions are brought forward. Okay. And then R3 note that the strategy will support the development of a consolidated parking approach for the new unitary authority in 2028. That's R3. I think just on that point, Stuart, skip application, it might be wishful thinking because obviously there's going to be other councils involved in that as well. So just how realistic is that recommendation? I'll take your comment on it before we move forward.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, at the minute, we're basing the strategy on here and now in terms of we're making the assumption that we're going to be continuing until we find out otherwise. So rather than telling them go, well, it's going to be cut in 2028, we turn around and say we need to liaisons with that in my garden.
And then R4 is the one we've got here. A cross-party working group is formed to consider the findings of the draft party strategy framework for Brentwood Borough and report back to a future meeting of this committee. So I just add to that, the composition will be 3 members of the administration and 2 members of the opposition. Okay. Right, those are the recommendations we have recorded both. So I think if you can do that for us, please.
Please members indicate for or against its own within the school. Councillor Kendall.
For.
Councillor Mayor. Councillor Barrett. Councillor Gordon. Councillor Hurst. Councillor Lewis. Councillor Parker. Councillor Barber. And Councillor Wilson. Thank you, members. That's carried, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right, to move on to item 10, which is the 25-26 quarter 3 performance. The report begins on page 147 of the agenda. Ms. Bennett, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. The report covers all 3 performance for the service areas that fall within the remit of reference of this committee. You've got included within the report corporate priority delivery updates, key performance indicators and complaints. There was just one thing I wanted to add before into questions, and that was around on page 153, the PSTN switch-off project, which is on hold, just to provide some additional narrative around that. That project refers to the public switch telephony network, which some of you may be aware of. It's a national industry-led project to essentially move from traditional analog phone lines to digital. The switch-off was initially planned for December 2025 and has been moved to January 2027, hence the project being put on hold. Initial scoping took place when we were aiming for that December date. The impact is minimal to the council, so it will be picked up in the coming months. But I just want to provide some extra narrative around that, because I don't think the side of the project was particularly clear. But other than that, I have some questions.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move the recommendation on page 147. Do I have a second, please? I'll second the recommendation. Now to open up to members. Any members wish to speak on this item? Councillor Hurst.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, no problem with receiving and noting the performance report. It is underneath. I think it is worth noting in a year when the administration just put £3.75 million into reserves, the only area of performance on this report, and of course it isn't comprehensive, I think. If you split the performance reporting up to years of committees, well, on this report, the only area which is in the green is the revenue and benefits area. Great shame that we haven't got Mr. Manson here to commend him for the excellent work that he's doing. But perhaps you could take a note of that in a minute and pass it back, and I look forward to actually having a presentation on revenue and benefits when he's able to attend. Hopefully he won't have any more misfortune. But the remainder of the report, I think, quite clearly shows to what extent this administration is struggling to get traction with the things that it itself feels are the things that should be delivered to our residents. Many of them are things that should be delivered to our residents. Most of them in this report are in the red, despite the underspend of the allocations to earmarked reserves that we have in the year. I think it's a serious indictment of the performance of this administration. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hurst. Do I have anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Bob.
Thank you, Chair. I'm only going to pick on a couple of items. The first one is the percentage of invoices from all suppliers paid within 30 days.
Should we point to
page 1.7? Sure, we're saying at the moment we're at 77.56%. So I'm not sure exactly how many that equates to in terms of vendors who have paid late, but many of those will be small businesses. Why do we have such, I mean, we say we have an issue with the scanner. That is something that can be resolved quite quickly with an IT department. That should not be impacting any of our suppliers as a council. And reputationally, if we're trying to lead by example and say to businesses within Brentwood that they need to behave with best practice, we can set a very good example. And that's very, very disappointing that we're not paying suppliers on time, because I work with many organisations, and that's one of the key metrics you are judged by in terms of how you perform in the corporate world. The other thing is, I just want to touch on the sickness. We've got lots of red indicators here today for our performance on days lost through long-term sickness absence over 20 days and under 20 days. Which departments do these relate to, and why are we seeing such a high level of incidence, and does it relate to one department in particular?
Okay, if we go to page 137, Sarah or David, if you could answer that when we go on the invoices, Ms. Scanner, please.
Thank you, Chair. With the scanner is fine. It's the interface between the scanner and the system. So there have been a few problems. It's quite an old system, so there is an option to upgrade it. But currently the view is if we go into LGR, it's to stick with that system as it is currently. We can review that if the performance continues to drop, but we expect it to stay below the 90%. There has been a focus on local suppliers as well, so that's at least in the green, but that is something that we are trying to address, but it seems each quarter is something that comes up in this case. It's scanner.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't know whether David, Sarah or Fiona would make a comment about the sickness sort of things. I might have to this is a position where we are able to drill down to each department to involve, but I'll take off your advice on that, please.
Thank you, Claire. We would need to take that offline in terms of departments. We do have that information, but I don't have it available tonight, but we can certainly feed that back. The only additional thing to say in terms of that kind of consistent red performance around 5 quarters repeatedly red there is that HR are doing a piece of work around whether the target is reasonable. There's recently been a new sickness absence policy launched, and the next stage of that is to have a look at the data to see whether those targets are reasonable now that we know what our tolerances are within that sickness absence policy. But we'll get you some more information and we'll feed that back to you.
Okay, that's the focus.
Thank you, Chair. Just interesting that things go by and by, because honestly, paying the invoices within 20 days is excellent. 30 days, in some businesses, I would call that excellent, but we actually passed a resolution a number of years ago that said that this council would pay all invoices within 22 days. And I think that was passed during a period of when things were pretty bad for small businesses and so forth. I can't remember it ever being reviewed. So somewhere on our statute books, we still have the resolution to pay within 22 days. So it seems, I accept the officer's reasons why it's not getting paid, but as I say, 20 days is excellent, but under our old rules, we would pay within 22 days.
Okay, maybe we can look at that, if we can pay any issue. Okay, I've got no one else wishing to speak. I'm going to move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Okay, against? Abstentions? No. Okay, thank you. Right, what I'm going to do now is go to item 13, which is the item. This is on the separate report and this is the amendments to the existing policy for granting of discretionary non-electric rate relief. We have a recommendation on page 3 of the report that the list endorses without changes the policy for granting of discretionary non-domestic rate relief. This is outlined in Appendix A. Basically, if you look in the report, page 4, there's two options, either what I've just proposed or option 2, not approve the changes. The policy is not recommended as this could cause difficulties for some businesses with their non-domestic rate charge and the relief they can apply for. So that is what I'm moving for the chair, but I second that.
I should second the recommendation.
Right, thank you. So, Councillor Hurst wanted to speak, and then we will try and get some answers to your points. Councillor.
Thank you very much. As I said before, in many ways, this item has got very closely with item 5, which unfortunately not able to take this evening. Perhaps Mr. Manson could have, in his presentation, explained what I'm about to ask, but I'll ask it anyway, even though he's not here. So, on the 1st of April, we have some quite substantial changes to the rateable system, and indeed to exemptions and discounts. Pubs are being treated differently, and retail outlets are being treated differently, and all of that has been well covered in the press, and I'm sure everyone's very well aware. And we're now voting to continue an unchanged policy from previous years into next year. It seems, I just don't understand the urgency of having to do this. Is the objective to avoid having to implement the changes on the 1st of April, or are we going to have to vote on a new policy very shortly after the 1st of April, which accommodates the changes in legislation, or have I got completely the wrong end of both things?
So I think in this case, unchanged means don't change any of the wording in the actual attachment or the actual report. It has been changed to take into account all those changes that will be from the 1st of April, but it's presented as it is rather than to make any changes to it. So it has changed quite substantially, and it does pick up those changes in the release.
I'm perhaps even more confused, Chair. So this is a substantially revised policy to take account of the new legislation, although it says explicitly it's unchanged.
Yeah, I think correct me if I'm wrong, David, where it's unchanged is the idea is it's not to be a problem to the business. Yeah? Do you imagine that?
I believe that it's an unhelpful language because councillors do not amend the policy in the appendix, please. I think that's presumption, but I think it's enough to be somewhat directive to us because changing it would create legal difficulties. But I think for our own satisfaction, Chair, the committee endorses the policy for. I think the revised policy, as outlined, I think that would solve the problem. I think it's the joy of English language and how you can interpret it, and not for being quite directive. It's like I have seen at Basildon Borough Council, which could explain things. I think no, I think we're in a better case than other authorities.
I think that's a very good way. But that's right. So is everyone clear now? David.
Just to add that there's no impact on the council. These will all be funded from the government, so it's just changing the policy to allow those release. But there isn't any impact on the council area.
Thank you. Just not going any further, I'm just going to move standing orders because we are approaching 9 o'clock. Okay. So is that we agree with standing orders to extend the meeting? Okay, great. We've got the recommendation there. Most people seem on board with what we're saying. If anyone looking for the same country, please raise your hand. But if that's not the case, I'm going to move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Okay. Lovely. Right. Okay. We're now going to move to exclusion of the confirm again, we are deferring item 5, okay? We will bring that back to a future FNR meeting. We wish well, I spoke to the call this afternoon, so we wish you well. Please pass that on to think that'd be important for us. And we're going to go to item 11, exclusion of the press and public. Is that agreed? We go to our session. Great.